The world has been left in utter shock as a crossbow killing that took the lives of 3 people in Enfield that took place yesterday has completely rumbled a community. Today we are delving into the tragic and shocking incident that took place in Enfield, London just yesterday. A triple murder involving a crossbow has left the community in shock and mourning. Here's everything that we know so far about this gruesome case. Let's start with a detailed timeline of events as they unfolded. So, at 7:28 AM, there was the discovery of the bodies. On the morning of July 10th, 2024, at approximately 7:28 AM, police were called to a home in Enfield where they discovered the bodies of 3 women, the wife and 2 daughters of well-known BBC racing commentator John Hunt. The victims had been fatally shot with a crossbow. The police quickly cordoned off the area and launched an investigation. The scene was described as horrific, with officers visibly shaken by the brutality of the crime. By 9 AM, authorities had identified the suspect of 35-year-old Michael Hunt, the son of John Hunt and brother of the 2 younger victims. Michael was not present at the scene, prompting an immediate manhunt. The police's search of the area, so they searched schools in the vicinity, were placed on lockdown as a precaution, while armed police units searched the nearby park and other areas where Michael was brought to possibly be hiding. At 11:30 AM, police found Michael's car abandoned near Hilly Fields Park, and the discovery intensified as the search efforts in the surrounding areas. Helicopters and ground units, including forensics teams, scoured the area for any signs of Michael, who was believed to be armed and extremely dangerous. Finally, around 2 PM, police managed to apprehend Michael in a wooded area near a park. He was taken into custody without incident and is currently being held for questioning. Michael Hunt is expected to be charged with the murders of his family members, and the motive behind the gruesome act remains unclear. But the investigators are working tirelessly to piece together the events leading up to the murders. The Enfield community is reeling from the tragedy. Local authorities have promised a thorough investigation and are urging anyone with information to come forward. So, of course, if you do have any information or you know anything about this gory case, then, please reach out to your local police department and provide any information that you've got. So that's a detailed timeline on everything that has gone on so far. But there is chilling footage of the moment that Kyle Clifford was seen fleeing the bushy scene with a crossbow after tying up his ex-girlfriend and her family and shooting them dead. Absolutely horrific. So, of course, this does come with a bit of a trigger warning for anyone, of course, but here's that scene. You can obviously assume that under that rag was of course the crossbow that was used. So there's, and there he is getting into his Seat. Before then fleeing the scene. Absolutely horrific. So, of course, he was actually stretchered out of the cemetery, and he was believed to be in hospital the last time I checked, although the article that I've just read did state that he is in police custody, but he's being treated for whatever wounds. But this was the moment that the Crossbow Killer was actually caught by armed police after a triple murder. So this comes from The Sun. This is their footage.
The search for the triple murder suspect Kyle Clifford is over. Mr. Clifford was detained this evening inside Lavender Hill Cemetery here in Enfield and North London. Hertfordshire police say that no shots were fired during the hunt. They spent around 2 hours inside this cemetery earlier, and around 5 to 5 today an ambulance came out of its lights flashing and sirens blaring, thought to have the suspect on board, and he was taken to a local hospital where he is being treated for his injuries. Footage taken from a news helicopter above the scene showed the man being stretchered to a land ambulance. His injuries thought to be severe, thought to be something along the lines of head trauma. In fact, in the footage, the actual area of his body was blurred. It comes after Carol Hunt, who is 61, the wife of the BBC racing commentator John Hunt, and their two daughters, Louise, who's 25, and Hannah, who was 28, were found dead inside their home in Bushey in Hertfordshire, around 45 minutes away from the scene of the hunt, where the hunt really zeroed in this afternoon. They were found last night. Police launched an overnight manhunt to try and track down the suspect, and that manhunt has come to an end here at around 4:30 today, where police have intercepted and detained Kyle Clifford. Louise Hunt, one of the victims, was Kyle Clifford's ex-girlfriend, was thought to be Kyle Clifford's ex-girlfriend.
So this is the footage that we've just witnessed. Obviously, him leaving the scene with the crossbow in hand, and yeah. What's horrific is just how calm he is leaving. There is no sign of panic. There is no sign of what have I done.
Police were called.
This is quite clearly premeditated, and there's no denying that, and it's absolutely horrifying. It truly like sends chills down the spine, you know? It's disgusting.
To a property in Ashland Close just before 7 p.m. last night. Officers attended alongside colleagues from the East of England Ambulance Service, and on arrival found 3 women with serious injuries. Sadly, despite their best efforts, the women, who are believed to be related, died a short time later at the scene. The victims are aged 25, 28 and 61.
The suspicion is that Clifford totally lost the plot and murdered these poor women after turning up at their house yesterday at some point. Neighbours in Ashland Close have told how a fleet of police cars and ambulances turned up there after the 999 call was apparently made by John Hunt. Locals were warned by officers to stay in their homes, and they are clearly shocked by what has happened in their quiet community. The family are all professionals, as well as John being a BBC correspondent. Both daughters run their own small businesses, one apparently selling cosmetics and the other grooming dogs. Police and paramedics tried in vain to save the 3 victims, but they were all pronounced dead at the scene. Police have not disclosed any potential motive for the murders, but such cases are invariably domestic in nature, with victims known to their attacker. The Sun has been informed that one of the daughters was in a relationship with Clifford up to the end of last year, and that he took it very badly when they broke up. Either way, the killer of these poor women must have had a serious grudge to do something so diabolical.
And this is exactly it. I mean, as of right now, we don't have an actual definitive motive, but you know, I don't like to speculate in cases like this because it's not right to do so. But you know, piecing together the evidence of a messy breakup towards the end of last year, I think there's clearly premeditated motive there. But there have been calls off the back of this to ban weapons, full stop, of course, in the UK. Now, I mean, this is not anything new. I mean, over in the US, I know the gun laws are quite loose in comparison to the UK. But in the UK, it's still possible for anybody to just go and buy a crossbow. Obviously, there is certain licenses that you need to have, but it's possible for anyone to just go and buy one. And it's the same for, obviously, knife crime is a huge issue in the UK. But let's take a little look at this interview here, talking about this.
Terrible story, a terrible, awful murder, a triple murder that happened yesterday up in North London in a place called Bushey, where Kyle Clifford, supposedly a 26-year-old man, is accused of killing 2 daughters, one of whom he was a former boyfriend of, and their mother, Carol, the youngest daughter Louise, who was his girlfriend, and her older sister Hannah, and they were all 3 of them the wife and daughters of BBC 5 Live horse racing commentator John Hunt, who we understand actually discovered the bodies. They were all supposedly killed with a crossbow. The reason we want to talk to Sue is because she was the lead search police officer for Raoul Moat when he was missing and needed to be found urgently. Sue, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
Thanks very much indeed for talking to us. Kyle Clifford is the suspect. He was sort of apprehended in a cemetery not far from his own house, seemingly having injured himself, we believe possibly because he wanted to try and take his own life. But we wanted to ask you, Sue, how was it possible the police were able to track him and catch him so quickly?
Well, the thing is, first of all, they would have spoken to all his friends, they'd have spoken to all his relatives, they would have spoken to any work associates, they would have automatically gone to his home environment and started to search those areas. When you have cases like this, it's very common for a suspect to go back to somewhere that they know very well. In the case of Raoul Moat, he went back up to Cragside in Northumberland, where he'd spent every summer holiday. So he knew the area very well. Right. So therefore, it was very likely that Clifford would go back to somewhere that he knew.
And so, in terms of the way the police in Enfield and the police in Bushey would have, the Hertfordshire police, I guess I should say, would have looked at that. They would have gone. They seem to identify him quite quickly. There seems to be footage of him leaving the house, and so quite clearly they were able to know who he was.
What happens is, of course, they will track down every piece of CCTV that there is. If anybody's known him, then it will have been reported, because it was somebody who appears to have known the family. It can be very quick to track somebody down. We knew that it was Raoul Moat who'd killed Chris Brown very, very early on, and therefore we were able to launch a manhunt for him. And it was the same in this case.
Yes, indeed. And so obviously, you know, as we say, Kyle Clifford is the suspect in the case, but you know, it's a terrible, terrible murder. It's not the sort of thing that even the police would expect to happen on an ordinary sort of quiet Tuesday evening in a fairly leafy suburb of North London.
And this is what's just so, you know, bizarre about the whole thing, and I mean that in like the most sensitive way, because obviously, you know, the breakup happened at the end of last year. What happened between, like, you know, last year and now? You know, we're almost 8 months on from the end of last year, and it begs the question. There were some tweets that were made from Carl's ex-partner, talking about getting out of messy relationships not too long before she was murdered. Could that have possibly been some kind of trigger, perhaps? Again, that is just mere speculation. I don't like to speculate on these things, but it begs the question. It's just trying to understand what was going through someone's mind to think that they're going to get a crossbow and go and do this horrific thing. You know, like, it doesn't make sense.
Absolutely not. And I think one of the things that this has caused us to really bring back into question is the fact that crossbows should be legislated for. At the moment, anybody can buy a crossbow so long as they're 18. Right. The only provision under the 1987 Crossbow Act is that somebody who is under 18 cannot have them.
See, this is where it gets very messy, because obviously, you know, anybody can just go and pick one up. It's as simple as that, really. And there needs to be more regulation, obviously, around this. And I do hope that, you know, it shouldn't have had to come to this for there to be that level of regulation. But, you know, I do hope that off the back of this, that is firmed up. Though nobody should have had to pass away for that to be a thing. But, you know.
Now, these are weapons of destruction, as we've seen, unfortunately, in this case. There's been about 10 people murdered in the last 10 or so years by crossbows. Now is the time when the government should think about legislating. We should make sure that you have to be licensed to own one of these. The only use that you should have for these is to shoot at inanimate targets.
So then there would be no reason for it to leave a shooting range, which would then mean that there's no reason to actually buy one. You should just be able to loan one at a shooting range and then use it at said shooting range and then hand it back. Similarly to, you know, bowling, I suppose. I don't know, like you wouldn't take a bowling ball out with you, would you? Because you got no need for one other than to use it at a bowling alley. So just do it that way.
Well, that's
They
right.
really-
And people do often wonder, I mean, it's a bit like the guns that are for sale in the US of A. People do wonder why you would want a crossbow. I mean, under what circumstances would you even want to have one? Because I think I'm right in saying there's been a few incidents recently. There was one here in southeast London of a guy who was trying to get into a house armed with a crossbow. You know, so it's clearly a problem, as you say, something that they seemingly can get hold of quite easily.
Absolutely. Anybody who's over 18 can go into a shop that sells them and buy them. We need to have these weapons licensed. There is no use for them other than if you are sort of in a sporting arena when you're actually target shooting at an inanimate object.
Yes. And of course, with deadly consequences, these awful weapons can be used for all sorts of nefarious purposes. And I guess the more something like this happens, the more likely people who might want to do bad things with weapons are going to go, oh, I could get myself a crossbow.
Absolutely.
This is the issue, but why is it taking for people to die for this to be raised? You know, like, I didn't know about the crossbow regulations, was that they were so loose up until today when I was researching this topic. Why is it so easy for people to go and pick one up? You know, why is there no question about what the purpose is? What need do you actually have for a crossbow outside of a sporting arena or a shooting range? Which, you know, in whichever case, you don't need to leave the premises with a crossbow to use that. You know, like, I don't see the purpose. It's very silly, I think, and I think more needs to be done about it, in my opinion.
In February this year, the previous government, actually had a call for evidence, so they were trying to look to see whether crossbows should be made a weapon in which you have to have a license and be registered.
Why would you not? It's no different to owning a gun. It's no different. Well, it is a gun to a degree. You know, it makes no sense.
I would call upon the Home Secretary to renew that call for evidence and to make sure that these weapons cannot be bought. You can actually buy on the internet a magazine which in effect makes these weapons, it'll fire arrows continuously. It makes them the same as a semi-automatic weapon.
Exactly. Why are they not in the same category?
These weapons should either be banned, or if they're not banned, then what they should be is they should be registered and licensed.
Right. And let me just take you back to all those years ago when you were tracking Raoul Moat and when you sort of found him. And there was a lot of, I mean, one of the things that a lot of people remember was Paul Gascoigne turning up with a fishing rod, offering to sort of take him fishing to end the siege. I mean, it was quite a bizarre moment, wasn't it?
That was such a surreal time. Like, Paul Gascoigne just rocking up with a fishing rod to Raoul Moat. The whole thing was wild.
Absolutely, it was. It was perhaps the only bit of light relief that there was in those 7 days.
Yeah.
Right, so what do you guys think of this whole situation? Obviously, it goes without saying that my thoughts and sympathies are with the families of the victims of this horrific crime. But I want to hear your thoughts and opinions. What do you think? That I'm right with what I'm saying about crossbows? Do you think I'm wrong? Let me know why down in the comments. And yeah, I don't even know how to end this, so I'm just gonna say see you later. Peace.